Hey, aloha, love tribe. Thanks for tuning in. I have somebody here with me that I have been fond of chasing after, watching her, been really excited about the transformation that she has been teaching people about Bitcoin and energy and mining and why the environment is actually going to be better off because of Bitcoin. This is Alana Mediavilla, the director of Dirty Coin. Welcome, my sweet, sweet soul sister.
Thank you. Thank you. I remember the first time I saw you was the Women in Brunch, not this year, but the year, I want to say 1 year ago. And you had this bright pink dress and we had the pink heart glasses. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, I wasn't expecting such a feminine, so much feminine energy at a Bitcoin conference. And it was awesome. And I love that it was right at the beginning of the conference because I felt like I had left that brunch with so many girlfriends, so many people that I could, see sprinkled amongst the dudes.
Yeah, that was such a special event, and obviously Natalie Brunell and Callie Bailey are the spearheads of this, and I got to go the year before, you know, and it was in a smaller venue. It was just at a restaurant, and I got to meet Svetsky, God bless him, because I was wanting to, I just started learning about Bitcoin, and then he was doing some dinner thing, and I was like, I don't know anybody. I'm going to go to the Bitcoin conference. What do I do? And he's like, go see Natalie, go do this, da da da, and and it was just such a great, sweet event. At the very beginning of this massive, massive, tens of thousands of people conference with mostly dudes, right? And there's some of us women, and we're like, what do we do? And so I love that Natalie put that together, and I got to volunteer and help and participate because, like you said, when you meet people at the very beginning and then you're going through all the rest of the event and you see each other, and if you have those pink glasses or whatever, you're like, I see you, we were there together, what's up, high five, sister. And so the community is so key, and the energy of the community is so key. And so obviously you're bringing people together with Dirty Coin, and you're educating different people all over the world about why Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is something is positively transformational for the environment and for society. So maybe you can give everybody a background of who you are, how you got to Bitcoin, and what's going on with Dirty Coin.
Those are three huge questions. Um, three completely huge questions. Well, I am the executive producer and director of Dirty Coin. And in 2020, I quit my corporate job at Google as a filmmaker at Google to
Wow.
pursue my own projects. I really loved working at Google. I loved my team. I loved the global team. I loved my access to people, like really, really smart people all over the world. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to think really big and like next billion users, NBU, next billion users, and how are you creating content for the next billion users? And that was my
Wow.
job. So I was making like videos with that idea. And so I really loved, kind of expanding my view of the earth and actually having really awesome friends all over the world that were helping me on these projects. And so I felt like if I can continue to leverage what I have learned with my own movies, like I want to be able to choose what it is that I talk about. I was kind of tired of making like corporate documentaries. And it's funny because then I end up with another data center documentary, which is Dirty Coin. But go with what you know, right? And I knew that I was good, but I wanted to prove myself with my own concept, not just a concept of somebody else that was basically like, this is a feature that we're going to be pushing, so please make a movie about it. And I really enjoyed it, but I was ready for kind of finding my own story. And I felt that, Bitcoin had been something that I had seen kind of grow in Silicon Valley. And it was something that not a lot of people would talk about it because it kind of meant that you were on Silk Road, you were buying drugs on Silk Road,
Mm-hmm.
if you had Bitcoin, or you were doing just something illegal. It had this kind of dirty reputation to it. But I remember kind of seeing it a little differently because I found out about, Cubans that were sending Bitcoin to Cuba. And then there were like people in Cuba that were turning it into their local fiat. So this was a way that like was able to send money, expat family is able, or diaspora family is able to send money back into the island. And I thought that was really interesting. And then I started kind of digging down that rabbit hole of like kind of borderless internet money. And I thought that was really interesting. And so that's one of the reasons why I felt like Bitcoin was just kind of something to keep an eye on. And then I saw the rise of crypto, and I wasn't really working in Bitcoin. Like I was working in tech, and I knew about Bitcoin, I was involved in Bitcoin in some ways, but not really in like working towards getting anybody else involved or buying Bitcoin or anything like that. For me, it was a very personal thing. I felt like honestly I was a huge degen for buying Bitcoin and learning about it and losing keys and all of that. So I kind of didn't want other people to have some of the negative experiences that I had had in my early days in Bitcoin. So I would just not really talk to people about it. But then in like 2019, 2020, I started noticing more of a rise of an anti-Bitcoin rhetoric because of its energy consumption.
Mm.
And I was like, that's bad for the environment. And I'm like, man, it's bad for the environment. This sucks. That's like finding out that your like favorite burger shop does everything with seed oils. You're like, no, I can't eat you anymore. So that was kind of how I felt. But then I started looking into it, like, okay, well then why is it bad for the environment? I want to find out. And then they're like, well, have you seen like the computers that run this? And I had been working at Google Cloud, so I very much was very aware of what data centers look like. And before Google Cloud, I did work for other AI powered machine learning companies. So I knew exactly what the physical footprint of our digital lives entailed. And so I was like, well, this is just a data center, but okay, these chips run hotter. They're only doing the one thing over and over again. Let me continue to look into it. And what I found was not only was it not bad, it's like such an incredible solution, multifaceted solution for different places. It's not just one solution for one place.
Yeah.
It kind of transforms to become a different solution. It's like a magical key that kind of changes shape depending on the keyhole.
Yeah.
And there are keyholes that it doesn't work in as well, but it's still this magical key. And I felt like, wow, well, this is something that my really smart friends, my smart engineer friends, my smart, these are smart people that are saying these things that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, but it's because they didn't do the 100-hour deep dive that I did. And so whenever that conversation would come up, how do you synthesize this wealth of time that you have spent learning about something into like cocktail conversation? It's tough because we also have an energy illiteracy that's kind of like at the bottom of like our mining misunderstanding. So I decided like this is something that is worth talking about because it affects everyone. And I started seeing regulation come in against Bitcoin mining. And I saw that the way that it's worded, this is something that's going to throttle data center growth, all kinds of data centers, your information, your AI, your websites, all kind of data center growth. The legislation and the kind of the narrative that's coming will affect everything. So nobody's going to be paying attention because it's just Bitcoin and they're not involved in Bitcoin, so whatever. But this is going to affect and is already affecting their daily lives. So I felt like I wanted the overall mainstream, like most people, to at least understand what is mining, what does it look like, and just gain kind of like a level of understanding because these conversations aren't going to go away. So then let's gain a level of understanding so that we can have kind of a more intellectual conversation about it and not just be like, well, it's bad for the environment, because that's just headline deep, and also depends on the publication, which headline.
Yeah, totally. Well, two things you mentioned, like, well, one was energy illiteracy, right? And I think that's something I've certainly have and continue to try to battle and learn about, like, why, you know, it's better the more electrified and the more energy we have on planet Earth, the more healthy and prosperous and safe our world can be, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. So can you, I think about energy, I had Elliot from Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol on, is talking about energy poverty. Um, a lot of people don't understand we need more electricity and energy on planet Earth for us to continue to thrive, and why societies that don't, or cultures and communities that don't have energy are at such a giant disadvantage compared to um, other societies and cultures that do. And so, can you help people understand who are listening? You know, more energy means more love, more peace, more prosperity.
And higher GDP. You
Yeah.
look at and higher GDP tends to also, contribute to happiness. It contributes to fulfillment. It contributes to pride. Like the pride of a country.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because higher GDP, more capacity to produce. You have a higher GDP. You can produce much more.
Yeah.
And you have these countries that are energy rich. Let's say, for example, you have a country that has like Paraguay, for example. They have Itaipu. They have this incredible dam that produces so much electricity. They have all of this energy. In their case, they already have a dam, but there are places that they don't even have a dam, but they have the water. And so they could actually create a hydroelectric infrastructure, but then they don't have the funds to do so. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And these same countries that are energy rich, and this is what is meant by energy rich, yet energy poor, because then you have people that don't have access to electricity, even though they're sitting on so much energy. But what's missing is being able to turn that energy, that available energy, into something that can be used by people, into electricity. And it needs to be turned into and transmitted to them as well. So there's this whole infrastructure capital investment that needs to go in to, and in order, and it's kind of a chicken before the egg situation, because you need capital to develop the electricity, but you still don't have demand for that electricity.
Yeah.
These people that don't have electricity, like Bondo in Malawi, where we filmed for Dirty Coin, they don't have also a need for it. They don't have a refrigerator that's there. They don't have an electric car. They don't have even a TV in some cases. Right now, they're starting to get more electricity, but these are people that didn't have electricity, so there's no demand, and yet they're then kind of stuck in where, what they can do with the available energy that they have. And available energy is in the form of burning wood. There's other ways of creating energy to meet our needs, to heat our homes, to heat our food, to cook. So, but then that's kind of it. And so other countries that have more access to electricity are then able to create and, buy an air fryer, for example. You have just more things that you have a access to be able to do. So, I personally dealt with, so for Malawi, I didn't go personally. I sent a crew and I Zoomed in or WhatsApp, FaceTimed, or any way that we could get connection in to them. And I was a part of it there. And we were in certain villages or certain parts of the village that had no electricity at all. And so it was very dark in some areas. But I could hear people like singing and laughing and talking to each other. And I could hear all this human energy. And then when we would get closer towards areas that, had a TV, there was a lot of people like kind of gathered on the TV. We were closer to electricity, but then kind of the human energy would go down because everybody was just kind of staring at the TV. And so that was a kind of an interesting situation for me, because it's not like, oh, these poor people in where they're at. They're not, there's nothing, they're doing great. They're happy. But then, electricity, the bringing of electricity doesn't necessarily always mean something positive. It could mean now you have the news on to rot your brain all day long. But that also means refrigerators at the corner shop so that they can sell cold items. I mean, I just feel like the electricity and the internet is like, it's a weapon, it's a tool, and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. But it's still something that I'd rather live with than without, because I know I live in Puerto Rico. We lose electricity once to twice a week. And, I lose internet. I don't have lights in my office. We can't put a fan on. It's hot. If it's raining, we can't go outside. I mean, it definitely lowers the quality of life, at least that I've been exposed to and expecting. And so I'm very aware of how never having an interruption in your electricity access kind of creates this bubble where you can't really understand what it is to live without it. But in a modern world, it's kind of very tough to live without it.
It is. It's super tough. And I just earlier today, I was dealing with, the internet being out and all this before, the interviews with you and with Brandon. And it's just like, oh no, there's no internet. What are we going to do? And I'm just like, you're going to deal. Like, it's either not going to happen or it's going to happen. But we're so tapped into that consistency of connection to the electrical grid, to the communication grid that exists. And so, um, I loved hearing you say just about hearing the human energy sounds, and yeah, I just finished reading this book called The Bringers of the Dawn by Barbara Marciniak, and she talks about like turning off all of your TVs, turn everything off because it's just like this brain suck, and it's just constantly pulling us away from source and this energy of love and in the infinite. And so I think a lot of us are so indoctrinated into turn on your phone, turn on the social, and da da da, we're forgetting to turn on to each other as human beings, and we're, you see all those pictures in social media where people are at the restaurant and everyone's just kind of doing this, and it's like that's your new date model for the new century kind of thing. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very fun. One thing that I remember seeing when we were in Madeira was in this touched me so much was the surgeon. Do you want to talk about, because we think about capital expenditures and we think about why it's so important, like how does Bitcoin incentivize this, taking the energy, whether it's a river, whether it's volcano energy, whether it's the waterfalls, etc. How can Bitcoin serve as uh, a way to bring human flourishing using natural resources that isn't, polluting, and then the capex is there? Does that make
Well,
sense? I don't know. It's a
yeah.
weird question. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. I know you'll get it. So
I mean, you need that capital to turn that energy, that potential energy, into something that can be into power, right? Into something that can be used by people. And in the case of Bitcoin mining, you can do Bitcoin mining anywhere. All you need is electricity and a little weak signal. Like Bitcoin mining needs less internet bandwidth than what you and I are using right now in this
wow.
call. I mean, it's a very, very simple thing that miners are doing, and that it's very light, and that's why you have certain conversations about block size and everything, because it is an advantage for it to be so light. And so Bitcoin miners can go and they can basically mine, or how about this? People, because this is something that it's often, I caught myself in discussing it with somebody when I say Bitcoin miners can do this. People then think, oh, well, this is a category of person outside of me. That's like saying like rocket scientists can do this. And you're like, well, I'm not one, so
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But really, anybody, any human being can buy a Bitcoin miner and plug it into a source of electricity. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. And there are like workshops and stuff to really learn how to do it. But then basically you can start, anybody can mine Bitcoin and they can do it from anywhere. And so that's a big difference than like, can you put a factory anywhere? You can't really put a factory in the middle of a very, very rocky terrain. But a factory is the one that is consuming a large amount of electricity, and very often, for example, Puerto Rico, we have a lot of our electricity. When you look at its development, it was developed to reach areas of manufacturing or areas of industry load. They were the ones that were like kind of, they finance that expenditure
Yeah.
for the electric company, right? It's not like individual people. It's these big customers of electricity. And normally, these big customers of electricity have a large footprint, a physical footprint. They have trucks coming in and out. They have dyes. They have chemicals, depending on what they're doing, right? And they're dumping those in the river. And we've had a terrible kind of, we all know what factories and industries are capable of doing, the kind of damage they're capable of wrecking. But anyway, they need a lot of people coming in and out and everything. Now, a Bitcoin mining operation, a facility that mines Bitcoin, can consume the same amount of electricity as a huge factory or even a city in a a small city, but in un vagón. Sometimes my English goes away if I'm speaking Spanish all day. A trailer, like just one trailer.
Yeah.
So it's very condensed, and you can just drop that trailer, or in the case of Gritless in some areas, literally bringing in each computer. They would bring in like 2, 4, 6 at a time. And then they would put them up. And by the time they're all up, they are consuming an industry load, small industry in their case, but in other cases, you can go as high as you want, as high as you can. And you can consume all of the wasted electricity that's there, and you can pay for that electricity as well. I think it's really important to note as well that because anybody in the world can just buy a computer and plug it in, you're going to see all kinds of stuff. You're going to see, it's like bad neighbors, right? You're going to see people that just don't, that leave all their trash in the front yard. That's just kind of like the human experience. So when it comes to talking about Bitcoin miners, that's like, you're literally talking about humans, people. And so there's going to be a lot of different applications. I definitely spoke with, I think that what I noticed in my journey, I spent 2 years interviewing Bitcoin miners all over the world. What I noticed was that the irresponsible ones, like the bad neighbors, they don't tend to last long. They can't, their local, like they don't pay their bill, they get kicked out. They do something that they just cannot. It's a very, very competitive industry. And if you're not doing it right, you probably won't last long. So I used to get upset when I used to see somebody. I'm like, oh, this person, they're not doing it right. And then like a few months later, they went out of business. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I kind of saw that like happen more and more. And then I thought, interesting. It's interesting how those things take care of themselves. And so, it's just such an interesting thing for you to be able to plug an appliance into your house and mine what some say is the most precious asset in the world. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy that anybody can do this. And it's not them. It's not the miners. It's anybody that can buy a miner and hook it up to the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, it's pretty, except like nothing else out there is actually producing value. If I were to go plug in my heater,
Right.
I want to go heat my house, any of this, right? It's like, okay, I'm just consuming, 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 but I'm not producing anything with that, that heat. And so I think about like, there's a lot of folks out there who are trying to figure out like, how do you do home heating? How are you doing, I'm heating up the Olympic sized swimming pool with the excess heat from all of these Bitcoin miners. And so, most people don't understand, and we think about flared methane, we think about all the the things that are polluting the environment, and now we're going to have regulations that say, hey, gas fields, whatever, you need to go cap that stuff or figure out, how to go deal with it. And Bitcoin miners are showing up like, hey, I'll take care of, I'll pay you to do that instead of you having to go put all this expenditure out there. And so can you talk about that a little bit? I live in Colorado, and I look out on the plains and the fields, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I'm an insomniac, I wake up and I see these big flames out there, and I'm like, oh, where is that? We need to get the Bitcoin miners because I know they're flaring gas. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I think this is one of the parts that when I speak with environmentalists, I think that this is one of the most interesting parts, that we're so used to things being good or bad, but things aren't like that. It's harder to sell, gray and nuance, but definitely there's a lot of nuance. And kind of going back to, you can mine Bitcoin anywhere there's electricity and you can get a moderate signal. You can then go to where when you drill for oil, methane comes up with everything, comes up with a bunch of stuff. But methane, if there's not a lot of it, or there's no easy access to a pipeline, they have to burn it in order, because methane is 26 or 36. The figure is in my movie, but I forget. Or is it 86?
It's 86.
It's
86 times
Okay.
more than carbon dioxide. Yeah, it's like over 80 times more. Yeah.
Yeah, 86% more warming to
Times, not percent, times.
times. Yeah, exactly.
86x.
Times.
Yeah,
Exactly.
times.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a lot of figures in the movie. So 86 times. And, if they just flare it, that would be 86 times more warming than burning it and just turning it into CO2. And so that's usually what happens. That's what you see a flare is. It's just that methane being burnt into the air. Now, a couple things. Methane, it's 86 times more warming because it is a very, very potent energy molecule. And
Mhm.
so that energy molecule can and should be used. It's just that there's not, like I said, there's not always like a financial or there's not an incentive to do so. And so it gets flared. But really, nobody wants to be throwing away this incredible molecule when it could be used. And so you have companies that are creating gear, like for example, upstream, where you can go and you can, harness that stranded methane and just turn that into Bitcoin. And you're doing that also off grid. And so it's not affecting the grid at all. There
Yeah.
are some countries and states where the grid is already so sensitive that the idea of having a Bitcoin miner come and or just a large load come and consume electricity from that grid is not really viable. Or at least depending on, that's the thing about mining as well, which is kind of fun. It's you can mine with few computers or a lot. It's like Lego pieces. So you don't
Yeah.
always have to be the size of a Costco. Sometimes you can be the size of a corner store and you could still actually be helping. So again, back to the nuance, it's very nuanced, but for the most part, it doesn't always, from a large industry scale, it doesn't fit in every grid. But you can go into the middle of nowhere, into the middle of the desert, or in beautiful Denver, and you can, or Colorado, and you can, drop your trailer there and you can mine. And you have companies like Crusoe that are doing that as well. They're doing that across Montana and a few different places, and they're taking the equivalent of Chase says the measure in the film of, and I'm not going to repeat it because I don't want to butcher it, but many, many cars off the road for them getting, like, basically using that stranded methane. So you're not putting that CO2 in the air, you're not putting that carbon in the air, and you're also using it. So here you are burning like something really valuable, and you could be using it and you could be turning that energy into Bitcoin. So, and a lot of people are doing it. I think a lot of people are currently not being very vocal about the fact that they are mining Bitcoin, just because you don't really have to tell anybody. It's just you and your computer. You don't really have to. I admire the people like Marathon and CleanSpark and all these big miners that, I mean, I guess they're publicly traded, so it kind of makes sense they have to, be out there, but still, like, they don't necessarily have to be out there. And I admire them for, like, kind of being the punching bag for Bitcoin miners, because Bitcoin miners is, again, any human that can buy a Bitcoin mining machine and connect it.
Well,
And
and let's talk two things I wanna bring up. So we'll do one about the shipping containers or bringing, Bitcoin miners into these remote locations that aren't even attached to a grid. And then second, we'll talk about decentralization and, like, BitAx and all the other little tiny things that are coming up so that we can secure the grid. What caught my attention, was, wow, like, anybody can show up at these remote locations that aren't gonna have enough ability to generate enough energy to attach to a grid, because obviously just getting lines to attach to a grid is extremely expensive. And so, you know, if you're able to be remote and moving around and flexible, and you can say, cool, I'm going to bring this, a shipping container or a half of a shipping container, and I'm just going to plop it here and stick my generator, and I'm going to go do this, and I've got Starlink, and off we go. I'm helping the environment, and I'm earning a little bit of Bitcoin as I'm doing it, and I'm stabilizing, the grid, the network, not the grid. And so I've loved, because a lot of people are just like, "What? What are you talking?" I've gone to tons of like, nature conferences and climate conferences with an ex of mine, and, I would have these conversations and people would be like, "Bitcoin's bad for the environment. It's boiling the oceans. It's terrible, and the energy and this." And I'm like, "Well, what are the solutions for all of these, stranded, wells out there that are just, spewing the methane and whatnot?" And they're just like, huh, that's kind of neat, So can you help people understand why, everything's not going to get attached to a grid, and it's not about producing the electricity. It's just about capturing the heat or the toxic methane. Um,
well, you have situations like landfills, for example.
yeah.
Landfills also are sources of methane, and there are cities where they do extract methane from the landfill, like in LA, and they use it to power their grids, like partially, of course. But sometimes a landfill isn't large enough to make sense, because it's not just that it's expensive to create transmission lines, you're also going through like people's homes, and people
Right.
then complain. They're like, you can't put that pipeline through my house. So it's really tough to get things going. And like the United States government has been sitting on a beautiful, beautiful new energy project. And they have the money, the government always has the money. They can just print the money. And they haven't been able to do it because it goes through so many different state lines and so many different like properties that it's just like a huge pain. And so it's not just the money. This is something that even the government can't always like just do. So it's to be able to have something come and consume this stranded energy, this stranded methane, this stranded solar. Here's another example. Let's say you have a solar or wind development. You need to build that where there is abundant land and abundant of that natural resource. That's not always where the grid has connectivity already too. So for a renewable energy project to say, okay, we want to, ask for a loan or ask for an investment and say, okay, we're going to make this facility happen. And connectivity lines are not, like interconnection lines are not going to come in for another like 5 years. You just created the infrastructure and it's just going to sit there, but they're not going to make the transmission lines until we for sure are there. So that you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna give you like a ton of money, and you're telling me that maybe in 5 years there's going to be a buyer of that electricity. But with Bitcoin mining, you can do both immediately. You can set up the solar and you can set up the mining equipment. So I think that I'm an environmentalist in the sense that I want to do whatever I can to be a good citizen of the earth. And I like to clean up after myself when I go to the beach. I do volunteer hours with my daughter, cleaning up beaches, cleaning up rivers. I believe in being a good citizen. And so in that regard, I am an environmentalist because I will do what I need to do to leave the earth and its people in a better condition than I found it, or at least I'll try. I'll die trying, But I feel like the term environmentalism has been co-opted by certain industries that like solar, like wind, like batteries, like electric vehicles. That it's like, that meme that says, taking Aunt Jemima off the syrup bottle, but leaving the corn syrup is exactly the type of policies that just kind of don't work. I think it says something different, but it's kind of to that effect. And I feel like, yes, it is important to be good citizens and good people. And if we are doing things that are harming others, to do something to right it. But to only do it from a surface level perspective that appears to be green or appears to be what the environmentalists want, and creating a narrative around your product is very biased and misleading. And unfortunately, I feel like the environmentalist movement, just like every other movement, right? Some people say that in some ways Bitcoin has also become co-opted by certain folks and stuff. There's always, when there's a force going in a particular direction, why stop them when you can just kind of nudge them and to kind of go towards where you want them to go? And so that has been an issue. And so I do approach my friends and the conversations that I have with people that don't necessarily do a lot of research, but they kind of are just on the left. They're on the side of whatever Gavin Newsom says, it's okay. I've never been to California and seen the streets, but whatever that guy says must be fine, because look at that smile, and it's something that I hear in Europe, I hear in South America, like, oh, California. And I'm like, have you been? I mean, A, it's beautiful. I love California. But B, I mean, it's in spite of some of the things that are going on there. So, I really hope that we can kind of change that narrative and perspective that if you don't abide by the commandments of the environmentalists, that you are, then therefore you don't care about the planet. I think it's more of, you look at, what the checklist is, and You use your own judgment and you make sure that you don't leave the culture stagnant, and you move forward and you explore new ways of creating electricity. You look at zero point energy, you understand nuclear, you start looking at energy independence. How is it that, most solar panels are made, if not, it's like 99% of them are made in China. So do we want our source of electric production to be in the hands of, like, manufactured in the hands of a country that could potentially be our enemy in the future or currently? And that could be China, that could be Russia, that could be Argentina, that could be Chile. Like this is kind of the story as old as time. And I don't think that, kind of when we started talking about this, we were talking about how progress is linked and GDP is linked to electric consumption. So we've already determined that being able to have access and control energy and use it to turn that into something creative, to turn that into a pencil, into a paintbrush, into a trip somewhere, into a movie. We turn this energy, and we as humans, we just turn it into something else, something hopefully better, something that can have a bigger impact than what it was as just stored electricity. So since that is so important in order to kind of move humanity forward, then we need to make sure that we are in control of our production of electricity and not put that in the hands of another country. And same goes the other way. If I were in China and there's something we're depending on the US, I would say the same thing. I mean, it's just important to be sovereign. I believe in sovereignty. I believe in
Yeah.
individual sovereignty. And from a country's perspective, I see Bitcoin mining based on, what I saw in our 2.5 years, we're going on 3 now working on this film, is that the countries that have embraced, like Paraguay, the states that have embraced it, like Texas, Tennessee. Wait, no, well, I wanted to say actually South Dakota, not Tennessee. Tennessee has something super cool too, but South Dakota. I mean, the people that are playing ball with bigger miners are they're putting improvements on their electric infrastructure. They're building new substations. They're building new transmission lines. They now have a client where they didn't before. In places in Ohio where factories are no longer there, there's no longer that large load because these large loads moved overseas. We have this grid that was built for this large load, and now you just have the residents paying for that capacity. And so you need that large load. And who's building new factories in Ohio? There are some people, and I'm not saying there's nobody, right? But not that many. So, but Bitcoin miners are willing to go to where the electricity is, and they're willing to buy that cheap electricity that nobody else is buying. That's why it's cheap. So it's important for sovereign countries and sovereign individuals to understand mining specifically, because very likely they aren't already on an energy crisis, and to ignore mining because of, again, removing Aunt Jemima from the package and not really understanding what is underneath and what are we really doing here with mining. I just think, whoever doesn't get it, they're gonna regret it in like 10, 20 years. And they're gonna see countries like El Salvador, Paraguay, Guatemala, Costa Rica, even Puerto Rico, Texas, and, including states. They're going to see those have kind of like a crazy unfair advantage. And that unfair advantage was Bitcoin, and it was available to them all along. It's kind of how I see it. I don't know. Let's see this video again in 10 years.
I know. Can you imagine everything we've done 10 years from now? We'll be like, "Oh my gosh, look at all the things that happened." Um, your point about security, right? And obviously energy security is huge. Just today, like not having the internet working over here at my house, and it's like, "Oh no, what do we do?" The social unrest that happens in places where we don't have energy security, where we don't have food security, where we don't have financial security, and we don't have communication security. Those 4 things. So we talk about the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, and he's like, "Oh, if you control who was it? It's Kissinger." And he's like, "You control the money, you control the food, and you control the energy, you can control the world." I'm going to layer the 4th element in there, which is the communication layer, which we're seeing decimated as we speak.
Yeah.
On a second by second basis, as we're watching what's happening in the UK, where they're trying to censor X and all of it, and just the absolute nonsense. to me, the peace, hopefully to have a peaceful world and a peaceful planet that I think we all strive for, we have to have these fundamental elements in place. And Bitcoin, because it can produce this way for electricity and energy to be uh, spread and have security in these local environments, whether it's in your own home, whether it's in your city, whether it's in your state, whether it's in your country, it can't be talked about enough. Like, if we have to be slaves to another entity's form of the food, the electricity, the money, or the communication, we are never going to be sovereign individuals, and we will never have inner peace. We will never have peace within our families. We're constantly going to be operating as slaves. And that's unfortunately what these centralized powers that be want, so that they can manipulate and control and extract value from us, um, in exchange for nothing. Um, and so I want to talk about decentralization, and that's not a phrase that I even really understood before becoming a Bitcoiner. I read this book called what is a Starfish and the Spider, and this was years ago. This was before Bitcoin was even discovered, revealed, invented. And it talks about the decentralized organizations versus centralized organizations. And you think about like AA and the 12-step program. Like, anywhere you go all over planet Earth, if you go to an AA meeting in Lithuania or in Thailand, for the most part, it's going to be sort of the same process, but you're in these different locations versus something that's central and you've got a leader, et cetera. And so, you know, decentralization to me is something that I think is a inner and outer security issue on all four of these fronts. And so, do you want to talk about like how the energy production of like why Bitcoin mining is so important, that we all should have at least one miner in our houses?
Yes. I mean, so I have no financial, like, they haven't even sponsored the movie, but the Bidax miners are really small little things that, yeah. And somebody mined a whole block. So a lot of people don't understand how mining works. You can either mine solo, and I think with Bidax, that's the only way you can mine. You mine solo, meaning you are putting these lottery tickets in with one little miner, and you're putting as many as you can, as many as your miner can give you. And if one of your lottery tickets comes up, the block is yours. Or you can contribute your lottery tickets to a pool. And if the pool wins, and everybody does, there's a lot of different other people that are putting in their lottery tickets, and they get rewarded for the quantity of lottery tickets that they put in if that block and when that block wins the block. Most miners mine this way because it's the most consistent way of making income. And a solo block is kind of like a lottery, like legit, like a lottery. And some people don't want to do it that way because, it's hard to just count on luck.
Right.
So those are the two ways that you can contribute. So you don't need to have like a huge operation. You can have something as small as this. You can have a couple of ASICs, like a couple of bigger Bitcoin miners have more chips. And you can use the excess heat to heat your home if you want, like some people do. I live in Puerto Rico, so I would not be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're also kind of noisy. So there have been people that have created like kind of like quiet shells for them. Again, Upstream has not given me any money or anything or sponsored, but I am familiar with everybody in the space, and they're not the only ones. Basically, this was happening even from data centers. You can put your machines in like a pool of oil,
Yeah.
and it's not as it's much more quiet, and you can also direct the heat more directly to a particular location. So there's a lot of different iterations of miners, and it's basically just chips and something to cool the chips, and that's it. It's pretty simple hardware to use. But to your question of decentralization, decentralizing energy production is also really important. And you see that in some countries where you have like all of the production in one island, like for example, in the Philippines. And then from there is transmission lines that kind of like take it across the different islands. That means that each island is not energy sovereign, and there's a centralization of energy production in one. So there's an issue, it kind of screws it up for everybody else, and then everybody else loses their electricity. Now, if you have, your solar battery combo or your diesel generator in your house, then you're independent. It doesn't really matter. Like I have a neighbor that as soon as our electricity goes down, I hear his generator go, and he gets like less than a second interruption to his life. And, he has like a nice big generator and he can be going through a hurricane with the electricity on. That guy's energy independent. So, but let's say, for example, our whole community were to invest instead of in like, and again, I've been studying a lot of Puerto Rico's electricity production because we have a lot of issues. And I've just it's just what's local to me. So I've been looking into it a lot. And it's also very representative for how energy production was done 100 years ago. So we started a long time ago in some countries to produce electricity. So a lot of our hardware is very old, very inefficient. And so we do need to make them more efficient. And as we do, I am in the camp of decentralizing production so that if you have a natural disaster hitting one side of the island, you can still have the other side be able to produce. Not only is it good for them, it's also good for the resiliency of the system in general. And we see that with Bitcoin, right? Or we see that with anything that's centralized can be hacked. It's a single point of failure. You have less points of failure versus when you decentralize it, you now have then multiple. And so it actually makes the whole system a lot more resilient. So, a lot of what I've learned in Bitcoin, I then see energy and then I learn from energy and then I look at Bitcoin, and it's been this really beautiful kind of back and forth where I've been able to learn about things that as a filmmaker I hadn't really learned about.
Yeah, I think it's for a lot of people who think like they're so tapped into the central nervous system of how communities work, whether it's your water, whether it's your electricity, whether it's your internet. We're just on autopilot a lot of times, and we just think like it's always there. I don't have to think about it. That's what those people over there do. I used to live in Hawaii, and we had a lot of folks who lived off grid. And, some of them were connected to the grid, but for the most part, they're pretty much self-sufficient. And I think, for all of us to have a mindset of the hybrid approach, right? Like the grid is very important for all of us to be able to continue to fortify, to grow, to be a part of. But it's also very important, just like your neighbor, and I have one too, because I'm up in the mountains, to have some form of energy production that is, well, if shit hits the fan, if there's a hurricane or God forbid, some kind of violence that happens, like you and your family are going to be okay for X period of time with, some food or with some energy or with whatever it is that you need. And so, rather than an either or situation, I think it's important that we think about what's the blended situation for us and how do we, keep ourselves secure. I just think Bitcoin is such an interesting, I know I'm looking at this. It's an ICO. Yes, here we go. I think it's an interesting tool that it'll pay us back to do the decentralization and to have home heating. I have somebody, Tyler, who's here in Colorado, and he's working on lots of different ways to, like, how do you recycle all of your heat, from the Bitcoin miners. And obviously we're in Colorado, so there's lots of need for heating for 8 to 9 months out of the year. So it's like, is it economical for us to go get a couple ASICs and plop them in instead of using the floor heat or whatever's going on? So I think it's there's just so much creativity and entrepreneurship and everything that's going on out there in the community. What have you? So let's come back to you, beautiful Alana. And one thing I love about you is you're a mom. You're a mom and you're busting ass going all over the world, being a super mom, being a creative, being an advocate and an evangelist. Like, how are you managing all of this in your life? Because that's a lot to balance or harmonize. I never say balance because balance is bullshit.
Yeah, I agree. Because balance implies 50-50, and it's
Yeah.
definitely not 50-50.
Yeah. It implies like static. It implies a static state. And
Yeah.
we're never in a static state. We're always dynamic. So I think of harmony. How are
That's,
you harmonizing your life
I
as
love
a
that.
mother and an entrepreneur and a creative?
Well, and a wife, because the husband also wants
Oh,
something.
right. That too. Don't forget.
Don't
Sorry,
forget the
husband.
husband. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely a harmony. I agree with you. It's not. I also don't say balance because it just again, there's a lot of implications, and
Mhm.
there are some days where I really wanted freedom, and I that was one of the reasons why I left my job and sucked seeked to be my own person. And I am the breadwinner of my family. My husband, and this goes into how I'm able to do this. My husband homeschools our three children, and
Wow.
he fixes our leaky roofs, and he makes sure that we're all eating healthy. And he is like the the boss of the house, which is really interesting because he runs it like a man. He doesn't run it like I do, like I would do it. He runs it like a dad, like a dude would run a house is how he runs the house. And all I have to do is put money in the bank, and he even administers the money. And I'll do some things on my own, but he really enjoys that part. And I'm like, just let me make it. So for us, I mean, I started working when I was 20, and I was pregnant with my daughter. I became pregnant when I was 20, and he was
Wow.
still in school. And we were like, okay, you're going to finish school, and I'm going to start like a graphic design freelance kind of business. And I started a magazine in Brooklyn. We were living in Brooklyn, and started doing a lot of people's like logos and menus and whatever. I would literally walk from store to store, and I would just offer them my menu of services. And with that, we bought diapers. With that, we bought everything. And we survived. And not only survived, we thrived. And then when I moved to New York, when we moved from New York to Silicon Valley, which is where my husband's from, he's from Santa Cruz. I continued working on graphic design and animation, started getting into Flash animations and Flash websites back in the day, and got a job at a video game company over there. And we were both applying for jobs, and I was the one that got a job first. So we never said like, you will be the breadwinner and you will, like, it was never that way. But all this to say that I've always worked and been a mother, and I kind of was launched from being a girl to being like a person that has to provide and a person that has to nurture and love and take care of a family. It's, at the same time. Like, I didn't become an adult and then I became a mom and then I became a wife. And, I kind of became an adult as I was kind of folding into all of these hats at the same time. And so we just created our own harmony, what works for us. And I'm still with the same guy that, he's the same father of all my kids, and he's my best friend, and we get along really well. And so I've always really treasured good people in my life. And I feel like that's something that I tell my kids, like, don't waste your time with bad people. Like, just don't, because you never know if you're going to end up with that person or whatever. And so just if you're never surrounded by bad people, you never have to think about, well, how do I shake them later? Like, no, you just shake them. The sooner the better. So just always shake those people out, those bad energies out. And so I'm a surfer. So I also just am like, I communicate with the water. I can feel the energy. I can feel the swell. I can look at other surfers. I can see, should I be swimming for this one, or is somebody else swimming for it? I mean, so I feel like I've had a lot of really good experiences in my life that have kind of led me to trusting my gut and trusting that there's something leading me sometimes that I might not understand, or maybe it's the higher me that understands something that the kind of lower me still hasn't like figured out yet. So, but I definitely trust that there's just so much more than my own consciousness, and other people's consciousness, and how do those affect me? And so with the children, I have three. They're incredible. They know that mom works. They know mom makes movies, and they're really proud. I was able to take them to Warsaw, and they were
Wow.
able to see me go presenting my film, the theater roaring with like 350 people like there, and then watch me get an award. So it's challenging at times, but you choose your hard. And this is definitely
Mm.
a hard that I want. I'm doing a women's studies class with the two girls on Mondays. So, I create my own schedule. So I'm just like, Mondays, this is what I do. And the world seems to have a huge confusion about what is a woman, and I didn't want my daughters to have it. And so they're
Mhm.
homeschooling, so I've put together a really great program for them, that we're going to be covering the whole year, and it's about being a woman and what that means, from the anatomy all the way to historical women. Being a woman in Bitcoin, I often get asked, like, how do we get more women in Bitcoin, or just the idea of getting women more involved, and or there aren't enough women. And I believe in the power of words. And so if we just keep saying there aren't enough, then that's it. Just put that on loop. There aren't enough, there aren't
Right.
enough, there aren't enough forever. What about when there are a lot? Like, what are you going to say? Like, get ready for the next thing. Get ready to say the next thing. Start saying it already, start making it real. And so I am a huge feminist in the sense that I believe in equality of opportunities. I believe that a woman but I just don't think that we are the same.
Yeah.
I think that the female energy and what we bring is so special and different. And for the longest time, I would think that me being a woman was like a point against me being in production and being in tech, because in some ways it was, in some ways it was a point against me. There are men that cannot have a professional relationship with women. There are men that cannot communicate with women. But in a way, that was a great way for me to filter creeps because for the most part, men can communicate with a woman without it having to be like a sexual interaction.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, it was a natural filter for me to then communicate with high quality men that do see the value of all people, or the value that people can bring regardless of who they are. And so, I guess I'm a different kind of, again, going back to movements that have been co-opted. Just like I feel like I am an environmentalist and I feel like I am a feminist. Both of those movements have kind of been turned into a corporate um, agenda that
Yeah.
I cannot abide by.
Yeah, I hear you, and I feel like, and this is one thing I'm so attracted to you by, because you are so feminine and you are so powerful and you're such a great example and inspiration for, you know, how to be a wonderful mother. Ooh, the lightning just went off here, the
I heard
thunder.
it. I heard
Ooh, you just got thundered and lightninged. I don't know if this shit's gonna go off now. Whoa. But
You have a generator.
you yeah, right. But you harmonize the masculine and feminine. And I just had Svetsky on, I think it was last week, a little bit ago, after the whole stuff that's going on with the Olympics, right? And that's been just like, what is a man, what is a woman, what's female, da da da, da, all of this. And it's just like, it's insane, the conversations that people are having, and the way that they're getting stuck in certain narratives, and they're being, it's just like, it's okay for us to be fluid in certain things, but there is exactly what you said. We're not the same, and we're not supposed to be the same. Nobody wants an androgynous, homogenized humanity. Like, the feminine and masculine energy and the polarities that we possess were given because, that's what makes the world go around, right? This kind of
We fit so
oppositional
well.
masculine feminine thing. And but doesn't mean that you're all one and not the other. That's not harmonized, right? You're never getting to go dance between the two. But we certainly have concentrations in one area versus the other, and some of us are like, obviously I'm more sparkly, and, but I still consider myself quite masculine compared to a lot of women, because it seems like the professions that I choose, it's very male dominated. There's, I mean, back in the day, it was like there's one female DJ to every 500 male DJs, right? And same thing with Bitcoiners. There's one Bitcoiner woman. If you go to the bathroom line at the conference in Nashville, there's 100 dudes in line to go pee, and the women's bathrooms are completely open. So, we're in these different fields, but we're still able to be present in our femininity and in our motherhood and in our nurturing, and in our creativity. So that's just something I've been admiring about you. And it's just like, it's not about one or the other. It's just like, where do we get to dance and find that? um
I value in experiences that I've gone through as I get older, as I get older as a woman, as I have two daughters, as I have a son, as I see my daughter's friends, as I, just there's a saying in Spanish, más sabe el diablo de por viejo que de ser diablo. The devil knows more because he's old and not because he's the devil. I mean, there's a value in getting older. And in filmmaking, I was very often, and still am, sometimes the only woman on set. I was a director of photography, still am, but now I hire more directors of photography. But I was a director of photography. I was the only woman, and I would come in with my gear, and people would be like, "Where's the DP?" I'm like, "Me, motherfucker! Like, I'm the DP." So there were a lot of moments where I just struggled. But when I would get an interview, when I would sit down and get an interview from somebody, I would get a different reaction from the people that we were interviewing than my male counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
When I was negotiating certain things, I would get a different reaction from the people that I was negotiating with than my male counterparts.
Yeah.
There were some areas where I started to realize, like, I don't need to be a man. I don't need to act like a man. And I feel like, in a way, it's like a psyop to teach us how to ignore our feminine, like, guts and our feminine powers. And I do believe that women are, we're tapped into something special. And I think it's part of how we protect our families. It's part of how we protect our communities. And we have been kind of trained away from understanding and seeing that. And I think if everybody were to come into their power, whether it's feminine or male or somewhere in between or whatever, I think that we're all going to do so much better, because we can all really, like, kind of decentralize human creativity and decentralize human progress, where it's not just one way that things go well. There are many different ways. And yeah, as a woman and as a mother, it's just not something that I'm just so proud of being able to do it. And in today's day and age, we're super conservative for some things and super, Bitcoiners in other ways, like believing in certain things, like, you could live on a Bitcoin standard, for example. So it's so beautiful to kind of go through life and change and learn and being open, but not so open that you're channeling the signal and the noise the same way. You need to be able to filter out, be open enough that you are kind of aware, if in case something is in signal, that you can incorporate. But there's a lot of noise out there. And there are such people are so open-minded, or filmmakers that are so open-minded and fair, that then there's nothing of substance that comes out of their films. And that, for me, was something. And that with Dirty Coin, people would ask me, like, "Oh, but are you gonna show both sides equally?" And I'm like, no, because the opposition is like 2% of the 100%. That would not be equally. So no, I'm not going to give them 50% airtime just because they are the opposition. I mean, no, we have some really great stories that the New York Times is not reporting on, that Time magazine isn't reporting on. We already have the other side, these blown up cases on the other side. You guys can go and watch that. This is going to show you everything else that is under the curtain that they're not letting you see. And yes, we are going to incorporate some of these other stories, but they're going to get as much airtime as the reality that they exist in the space, which is, look, all of this is being done. None of it is being reported by these major outlets. And they are blowing these small problems completely out of proportion, continuing to use bogus science. Why would I give something that I've already discovered to be unscientific airtime?
Well, and again, like, we think about how are we processing information as humans, especially the new ones and the people who aren't familiar with Bitcoin and familiar with, this new thinking about energy as something like we want a more electrified world. And so and I love what you're saying, like, you don't want to give too much airtime to the bullshit. However, if we're not acknowledging that it exists, and this is the counterpoint to it, we do sound like we're in a cult. And so does, the New York Times and
Like the New
Time
York
and all the
Times.
bullshit, right? And so it's just like the things that I see, like, like I remember the first Bitcoin conference I went to, and it was like there was mining, and then the next track was, or the next presentation was about the memes, And I was just like, whatever, I'm not going to sit here. And then I was like, fuck it, I'm going to sit here and listen to the memes. It was still to this day the best presentation I've seen at any Bitcoin conference. Here's
Wow.
why. Our cricket grasshopper minds and attention that's like, okay, oh, next thing, sparkles, squirrel, the whole thing. If we can't capture something very quickly in a political cartoon or in a meme or anything, you're going to lose the ability for somebody to click deeper and go deeper into their rabbit hole thought process, And so I think it's important that we keep remembering, like, we're lucky because we're already in the rabbit hole, and we're dancing with each other, and isn't this fun? But like 99% of the people are still way the fuck out here, And so it's like, what's their little amuse bouche? What's their entry point into this journey? And so, not that there's one right way to get anybody interested in, dropping their ego and understanding this new way of thinking. It was like these little tiny compare and contrasts, like, here's this world and here's this new world, here's this in one little square in a picture, and it's like, how the heck can these meme guys or girls do this, and so from the memes all the way to the beautiful documentaries that you've created, it's like, how do we help people on their user journey, on their discovery into, what is their truth, what is the new way of looking at the world? And so I love that you are taking all this wonderful time and energy out of your life to educate us and to educate the masses on this. And I think about, like, I want to circle back really quick with empowerment, because you had said something about feminine empowerment and female empowerment. Rachel Geyer, do you know Rachel, who's La Femme Orange, right? And so she spoke at in Madeira, and she was talking about, like women's empowerment is bullshit. Like, don't ever say that word, or don't ever say that phrase. And I was like, okay, why? And she's just like, we're already empowered, but we've got stuff that's covering us up. So our job is to, like, move that stuff out of the way, so that, like, what's true and natural, which is the feminine essence, can shine forward, and I loved that, because, like, we think about, like, we have to add to something and get more empowered. No, we don't. We have to delete what is unnecessary. Like a sculptor will delete all the things to create the new piece of art.
Yes.
And so I think about all of us. It's just like, what has been put upon us as women, as men, as a society, as everybody in between, like, what needs to get removed so that the core essence of us can shine forward, and shine true. So I feel like that's what you're doing.
Thank
And
you.
I love it.
Thank you. I want to continue to do more of it because people have responded really well. And when I started this, a lot of people were like, we don't need another Bitcoin documentary. And I'm like, you don't get it. This is
It's
different.
different.
Everybody says that. I'm like, no, but this time it's like true. It's like, it's different. And then same, FTX, Doge, it's different. No, it's the same, but it's not, and I have been able to trust my gut, and nobody's going to go to the movies to watch it. Well, we've already been selling out screenings literally all over the world, and we're going to theaters on Halloween. So at the end of the day, I think we're all spiritual beings, and our bodies are our vehicles on earth, and our bodies have certain advantages and disadvantages, right? It's like some people have a Corvette, some people have a truck, they have different things, but ultimately the driver is, I think, the most important part of the whole thing, of the whole equation. And I refuse to believe that people don't want to know. I think that some people, they don't know that they don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And when you then empower them, I do think that people want to be empowered. That's how suddenly everybody was like a Ukraine expert overnight. People want to know. They want to know. They want to find out. Now, where they're finding out about things and all of these things it's an interesting situation there. But that's breaking. That's breaking apart. I mean, look how Trump and Elon Musk yesterday spoke for 2 hours on X, and they even received a letter from the European Commission, what ACH? Correct me here. I'm filling in the blanks. Thank you. We are witnessing that these mainstream media, the grasp that the mainstream media has had on people people's minds, it's breaking apart and it's being replaced. And, it's a little bit of a shit show at the moment because the internet kind of opened the doors to everyone. But, my daughter has learned to play piano on the internet. I've learned to do half of the things of my job on the internet. So, you can learn how to build a bomb. You can learn how to, create a career and live back in your island of Puerto Rico making movies. So I think it's important to understand that every tree that reaches high also reaches low, but
Mm.
stay true to yourself. And I think that people want to know, and I disagree that people want to stay ignorant. I think that it's time for people. I don't think it's time for people to wake up. I think people are already waking up. And what are they waking up to? And that's why I also don't want to add to the noise of the problems. So if I were to instead make a documentary on how trans men or trans women are doing XYZ, I'm kind of again shining a light at the problem. So if you're waking up, what are you waking up to? Are you waking up to, oh, look at how we can produce electricity in a decentralized way for energy, for sovereignty, and this, like, what are we spending our time having a conversation on?
Yeah.
And I much rather spend my time doing interviews like this and talking about how countries can become sovereign again, how they can become energy abundant, a tool that is not controlled by the central bank. And I rather have these conversations than to just kind of air out the dirty laundry that humanity has had. And in a way, we just kind of have to wash our hands and move forward with respect and looking at what is really at the foundation of a lot of the other problems that we're talking about. Because there's a lot of deeper, more closer to the core things that I think are bigger issues. I can have an opinion over women's sports and all of that. But I feel like if we kind of go back to the core, we're going to kind of handle that as well. We don't necessarily need to talk about specific sports players. That's just too myopic of a situation because the problem is much, much larger. Or the situation. And that's where the good stuff is. The good stuff isn't in the headlines. You got little human rats talk about this for a week. The deeper stuff is where the real change is going to happen. So I'm excited. I live in a bubble full of really smart, freedom-minded people, and let's just try our best until our time is up.
It's so important, and I love what you said because it's like and I get Velcroed into the bullshit sometimes because 'cause I'm just like, "Oh,
We
I'm
all
picking up
do.
the thing," and, I get the outrage, and I'm like, "Yep, as planned, there you go." We're not I don't think any of us humans are completely immune to it, but the more that we can redirect our focus to building
Yeah.
is, I think, where we're gonna find all those great solutions and where we're gonna obviously have, like, we're talking about energy, and I talk a lot about I meditate and I teach meditation. I think about energy hygiene, like our own internal energy hygiene, and so if we're not, um, conscientious about what we're letting come in to this up here, like we're going to constantly be hijacked by anything, And so it's like we have to have those healthy boundaries in our minds and our internal operating systems, and so that we can keep building the future that we want to build. Otherwise, we're going to be at the whim of these powers that be that constantly want to extract from us. And so I think energy on all of these levels is such an important conversation. And I love so much that you didn't listen to anybody who told you don't make another Bitcoin documentary. Like, I am so glad because your film is completely different. And everybody needs to go watch it. And whether you're a Bitcoiner or not, it's like understanding how things work out there is super duper important. And where can everybody find you next with the film? Like, what's happening on the agenda for you?
So this documentary has been completely done independently. I raised every single dollar myself,
Yes.
and yeah, I contacted every
Wow.
miner. And now that being said, I raised every single dollar from a lot of people that were helping. So I wasn't alone. I was just alone as a captain, but definitely not alone at sea. I had a lot of
Yeah.
people that, helped along the way. And I'm really grateful for the people that I've met. But the movie has been called Dirty Coin since day one. So people had to really trust me to sit down for an interview for me because I could have, it said it. They were signing a contract that said Dirty Coin the Movie LLC. So, they knew what they were getting into and they still sat down and they had to trust me. So every single person that sat down for an interview had to know me. and had to kind of understand what it is that I was doing. I told everybody I will present what I see. I had to tell my investors this too. So I kind of set myself up to make the hardest movie that I could make. You know, the studios don't want to know about Bitcoin or crypto, especially during crypto winter. And
Right.
Bitcoiners don't want to, you know, they've been rug pulled enough and they don't want to get involved in things that are going to be another rug pull. Investors don't want to invest in films because only 3% of independent films make their money back. They're
Wow.
going to give money to this girl that says she's going to like interview miners and call the movie Dirty Coin, another Bitcoin documentary. I mean, all of it was very gut driven. And I think that the people that went with their gut are now kind of excited and happy. So what's next? What's next is that I'm also independently distributing it. Because here's another thing people kept telling me, people are not going to come out to the theaters to watch this. And I'm like, I think that they will. I think they will. Like Bitcoiners, they have meetups. There's a community. I think there's something really beautiful about being together in person. You know,
Yes.
who are you going to meet at a Bitcoin documentary about mining? You know, you're going to meet people that are curious about it, that are aware of it. You're going to possibly meet new people. You can go to a meetup after. You can discuss what you saw. You can tear the movie apart. You can say all the things you wish the movie would have had. That conversation is probably going to be even more valuable to people than having watched the film. But that conversation can't take place if they don't watch the film together. And so since we premiered on the day of the halving in Warsaw, which was another like just angelic moment right there. It was so cool. For 2024, we premiered Dirty Coin. And since then, we've had 11 screenings and it's been around, let's say 2,200 people that have watched the film. And that's not a lot of views on YouTube, right? You look at YouTube, you're like, oh, only 2,000 views. But or 10,000, this is better than that. I hate that this only has 10,000 views. But imagine 10,000 people together. That's
Exactly.
intense. That's beautiful. And that is one of the things that I want. I rather have 20 people in a theater, just 20 watching it together in unison at the same time, coming out of the theater at the same time, and then discussing it. The people that are into Bitcoin are rocket scientists, tech engineers, doctors, mothers, husbands, fathers. I mean, there's so many incredibly smart people out there that are curious about this that I feel like, you know, once you see, you can't unsee. You can't put that blindfold back on. And so I want to make sure that those experiences are happening in the space with other people. A lot of the scenes cost me a lot of money to make. So I personally love seeing them on the big screen because I'm like, because in the phone, it's like, you know, it's just like a little stamp. And on the big screen, you can really appreciate it. All of the music was made like here in Puerto Rico, a musician friend of mine. So there's also a better speaker, so you can really hear everything that we did with the sound. We did 5:1. So like we really created something really good. And on the phone, it'll just all get compressed. So we'll get to streaming later, but for the moment, there are a lot of documentaries online. So people can go and watch one today if they need to get their Bitcoin documentary fix. But for me, those moments of bringing people together and getting them to watch this and have this experience together is just so powerful. And I believe in the movie theaters as well. I think that things are changing. And as a filmmaker and executive producer, I am now basically flexed being a director, making the movie. People like it. Yay, done. But then now it's like, as an executive producer, then how do we make sure that this film gets seen? How do we make sure that this film makes money? Because money, it can be seen by more. We can translate it to more languages. We can get it into more theaters. We can get more people to find out about this. And so that's what I'm working on right now. We're going to theaters on Halloween, and I'm aiming for 2,000 screens. Oh, I heard the thunder again. Yay! Thunder agrees.
Halloween. You just said Halloween. Oh my God.
Halloween. Yes. Halloween is when we're going to go to theaters. I am aiming for 2,000 screens. This is everything.
Wow.
Movie theaters. Yeah, I'm going big. I'm going, and it's not even that big. You know, 2,000 isn't even that big. But 0.1% of creative production companies are founded by women. So that's me. I have a production company, 13 years in business. This is my 13th year. 3% of independent films make their money back. And I'm on my way. And I am determined to being part of that 3% of independent films that are going to make their money back. And not just because, money, but because this is going to allow me as a producer and as a director and as a thinker to get more of my ideas out there and to get more investors on board earlier so that we can, and basically just gain more trust in the space. So my idea was not to make a movie to go on YouTube. My idea was to make a movie that would, make money, make its money back, and be seen around the world and valued around the world, and help kind of enlighten people on where we're heading. And this is something that I was having a conversation over dinner with some friends, and they said they weren't paying attention to this because I was telling them Dirty Coin this week is going to be screening for free in Norway because there's a potential ban on Bitcoin mining in Norway. Mm-hmm. And like, well, who cares? I mean, if miners can move other places, it's true. But the way that the bill is being written, this is anti-data centers, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So this will affect everyone. And what if miners were balancing the grid in Norway? Who's going to suck up all that extra wind or whatever, like geothermal, I think is what they have over there. There's so much more to the conversation than to just specifically say it's good or bad without really kind of, I'll be back in 20 hours. Let me do some reading about this specific location. I mean, that's really the answer that people kind of deserve. But again, you're having dinner. You just kind of want to say what's on your mind. And what's on my mind is that you don't need to be in Bitcoin for this to affect you. This is going to affect you. You're just not looking at it because it's, targeting Bitcoin, but it's going to target, it also targets Amazon, targets Google, it targets all these other data centers as well. And where your website will run on a data center. So I think it's really important for us to be paying attention and to understand what is going on. And have fun. It can be, I feel like the world can feel a little black, like it's kind of dystopic future is upon us. And it's, but history is not written yet. We have an opportunity to, white pill people and make them feel empowered and make them know that they are powered. How about that after what you said?
Yeah,
make
exactly.
them recognize their power and understand that, they want your power because they know you have it. So yeah, so let's just do that. Let's just all recognize our power, and let's have really awesome films that challenge our minds, so that we can use the medium for positive and not for, forwarding the gains of Terminator.
I know that's not the future that we want to envision, and I think what you're doing too is so. It's so, I don't want to say easy, but it's lower hanging fruit if you're just going, I'm going to make something and plop it up on the internet or up on YouTube, versus I want something that actually people are going to see each other in our skin suits and have conversations with each other and have an emotional reaction, have a mental reaction, and then possibly have new relationships that get formed because of some common threads that people might be interested in, And so that speaks volumes to you and your character and how you operate, instead of just, I'm going to just blast some content out there and I hope it sticks to somebody's wall here. So thank you for bringing us together with your mission, with your message, with your magic. And I'm so happy to know you. And I can't wait to, keep seeing what Dirty Coin's going to do. And I can't wait to see what happens next. But I think, a lot of us as creators and creatives, we think like, what's the next project? What's the next project? And it's like, you've already got this one thing. Like, now it's time to go spread it, and distribute it, distribute. And so it seems like where you're at right now. So I'm excited to see what the shift is in our consciousness, and the shift is in how we're going to operate as humanity because of Dirty Coin. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will say, I will not take credit for the shift, because the shift is happening and it's a wave that I feel. And that's why I know that Dirty Coin is just riding this huge wave. So thank you for your time and for interviewing me today. I am in the point of spreading it. I want people to watch it. It's 70 minutes long. Used to be 69 minutes long. And, I just want people to watch it, and I really appreciate you giving me the time to be on here to talk about it and share a little bit more about me.
Totally. You're the best. And everybody who's listening, I'm going to have all the, information and everything in the show notes, but go to dirtycointhemovie.com. You can also follow Alana and Dirty Coin on X at dirtycoindoc and Alana Mediavilla on X. And again, thank you so much. And I just want to ask you one tiny thing, just one thing, it, and we'll do it like in a minute or less. If there's somebody here listening to this episode and they're just contemplating, should I go make a thing? Should I go put some time and energy into this vision that won't let me go, that keeps scratching at my consciousness? What would you say to them?
I would say do it. I would
Mhm.
say launch yourself to do it. And one thing that I've said from the beginning, it's if I fail, I'll fail at making my first feature documentary. And now it's like if I fail, I'll just fail at the box office for my openings. My opening week is going to fail, but it's going to happen. And I'm willing to fail, totally willing to fail 100%. But I'm not going to stop until it's done. And when I fail, I'll just, figure out a different way, because I was so close. Usually failures don't completely take you out. They just kind of knock you off balance a little bit, but they just train you to not get off balance that way again. So they make you stronger. So
Yeah.
even when you fail, you're actually winning because you're getting closer to that. So I would say go ahead and do it, and do not be afraid of failure. Kind of embrace it. Embrace that you're going to fall a few times. Because if you didn't, I'd be something's wrong
There.
here.
That's a little weird.
If everything's too smooth, maybe there's something else that you should be worried about. But yeah, I would say yes, go ahead and do it, and don't ever wonder. Don't stay with the wonder of could you have done it? I mean, that's just going to eat at you forever. So I would say go ahead and do it. Have fun and enjoy the failures.
I love it. That's such great advice. And yeah, for all of us out there who are creators, like just keep doing it. It's in us. It wants to come out. We're just vessels for these messages. So, when we get right with that that truth, then I think we can be in service of a better world for ourselves and for our children and for each other. So thank you. And thank you again for everything you're doing, Alana. I'm so happy to know you, and I'm so glad to call you a friend and just inspiration in my life. So thank you.
Aw,
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
totally. And oh, whoa, a big lightning just hit. You're going to hear a crackle in a minute. It was a big one. Oh my God. Um, but okay, that's good news. So that's lightning strikes. We're good. And thank you. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
And
wow.
thanks everybody for tuning in. And again, make sure you guys go follow Alana and Dirty Coin the movie. And until next time, we'll check you guys later.